Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A.IdlePodcast, the podcast where I do weekly book reviews. This week, I read The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. Published in late 2000 by Avon Books, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, this is book 2 of the Bridgerton book series. It depicts the relationship between the eldest Bridgerton sibling, Viscount Anthony, and Kate Sheifield, which in the series she is known as Kate Sharma. Now, I just want to say, before I even get into the rest of this episode, I am so excited. I don't know why. It's probably because we are literally on the eve of the premiere of season 2 of Bridgerton on Netflix, which is what this book is going to be adapted into. So I am so excited, honestly, in a few hours actually, because it's like 8 o'clock now, and it'll be coming out shortly. So I am super excited for this. I'm really excited to binge all of season 2, probably by the end of the day tomorrow. So I'm like kind of nervous because that's how excited I am to just watch this series. Now, Quinn is an established regency romance author, and for the sake of not being tedious and repeating stuff that I already said, I will direct you to my review of the first book, which is The Duke and I, and that depicts the romance between Daphne Bridgerton, the eldest daughter, and Simon Bassett, and that was season 3, episode 10. And that is streaming both on YouTube visually as well as on podcasting platforms. So if you want more background information, feel free to head there first. Also, there are no intentional spoilers, but if you want to be surprised before you watch the series, probably skip this episode until after you've been informed on what happens, because I definitely touch on some of the twist. Now, this book, when it comes to the writing style and the voice of the book, first of all, it's still third person, so we're following both of our characters. We're able to equally understand their thoughts as well as, what they're saying out of their mouths and the intention behind it. In this book, much like how the background information on Simon was presented through flashbacks and just memories, that was very similar to how we learned about Anthony as a child, as well as his father's death. Now, when it comes to what moves the plot along, the key instigators here are obviously Lady Whistledown, who has her gossip interludes throughout the book, which open each chapter. And essentially this updates the town, but as well as the readers, on the events that may have taken place previously and the public perception of those events. But also, this kind of works against some of our characters because it limits the viewpoint on each character's personality. So it limits them to one character trait. For example, Anthony Bridgerton is known as a rake. And for a refresher, that just basically means he's running through these women. That's really what that means. And, that could be true, but that's not all he is. So, and the second instigator is Lady Featherington. And honestly, she's just a gossip. So even if it weren't for Lady Whistledown, she would be running her mouth around town. And so she's someone that helps move the word of scandal, which everyone is scared of in this era, throughout the town. And it's such a shame because I didn't really mind her in the series. I thought she was really annoying, but in this book, I actually kind of did not like her, at all. And then we have a couple inciting incidents. Now, my first one is Anthony deciding to marry Edwina. And although this is not an incident that kicks off fast-paced events or something drastic. This is essentially what provides the solid resolution for Anthony to stick to throughout the book, but it also forces Kate to protect her sister and therefore oppose Anthony in everything, which in turn, they remain in each other's presence by their sheer will to stick to, this Anthony sticking to his statement of marrying Edwina, and then Kate sticking to this statement of protecting her sister Edwina. And then the second inciting incident is the bee sting that comes later on in the book. And this is because it literally forces our characters together. So, unfortunately for them, but I look at it as fate intervening. And for lack of a better example, when I was writing this outline up, I kept thinking about if anyone's seen the Final Destination films and how, in those films, death was always kind of drawing up what was going to happen, and he was always informed, and death was going to find them if they escaped it or whatever. Honestly, I feel like Kate and Anthony would have ended up together anyway, but this was kind of just fate's way of being like, all right, let's go. You're wasting too much time. So that was certainly, I would say, the main inciting incident, but had Anthony not decided to marry Edwina, we wouldn't even be in that situation. So, okay, so when it comes to character arcs, now, there are a few characters in this book, and I only chose to highlight 2 of them. And I've noticed this is a pattern with my reviews. It's mainly because I guess you could say the traditional protagonist and antagonist, or when I find that there are 2 personalities that oppose each other so extremely, I like to pair them up against each other and just explain why these characters clash so much or why they're so alike or whatever. So, of course, we're just going to talk about Kate and Anthony because that's what this book is about. Now, Kate has, throughout the book, carried the labels spinster, second best, and black sheep of the family. Now, spinster is a term that's assigned to any young women in this age that are deemed too old to marry, and they're too old and our too old is not the same at all. I want to say Kate is 22, 21, and that's seen kind of as like old. And second best because Edwina, her sister, her younger sister, is, the diamond of the season. She's gorgeous and everyone vies for her attention, and thus this puts Kate in the second role. Her main desire is to protect and guide her sister. Her fear essentially being that Edwina will be miserable in a marriage to a terrible person, which is not a far-fetched fear because, as we see, and as I discussed in my last review of The Duke and I, a lot of marriages are not foundationed in love. So a lot of them are alliances or just agreements to produce heirs for familial legacies. So now it's interesting, her character traits basically from Anthony's mouth is that she's very direct, straightforward, and forthright. And this is what caught Anthony's attention because she broke the mold of a debutante, of someone who is supposed to be innocent and only speaks when spoken to, shy and very submissive all around. And Kate is not that at all. And her character arc really hovers around going from a protective sister to a swooning viscountess. And I think that's kind of a stretch because I will go as far to say that not much changed when it came to Kate's character. Her resolutions changed, but she didn't really have a dramatic difference in the beginning and the end of the book. It was just, situational, where she was positioned in society changed, of course, but she didn't have this you know, extreme change. However, Anthony did. Now, he carries the labels of Rake, Viscount, Eldest Bridgerton, and Heir. So some of those are inherent and very overt, whereas labels like Rake, he clearly earned that label for himself, but that was assigned to him by the likes of Lady Whistledown. His desire is to reproduce and continue the legacy and pass down the family name, the family wealth, etc. Now, it's funny I mentioned protagonists and antagonists just a second ago because I would classify Anthony as both. Let me explain. And this, of course, is not like the exact definition of a protagonist and an antagonist, but he has so much internal conflict that he's really just fighting against himself. And this is centering around the topic of mortality. And so his fear is growing inside of him. And this villain that he has created by sticking to this belief that he has that we're going to discuss in just a second, it slows down the growth for both him and Kate. And so throughout the book, he has, regardless of any external conflicts, regardless of the situation and the aggressive conversations he has with Kate, he has this battle inside himself. And for most of it, he's losing. How do you lose a battle against yourself? Well, you keep yourself contained to this fear, whatever it is that you have within you, and that stops you from living your life and being happy. However, he did have a dramatic transformation because he goes from someone who is very dutiful, and he's doing his job as an heir, which is to marry and produce and therefore have an heir to pass down the family name to someone who is a very loving husband. And this doesn't seem on the surface like an intense change, but again, in this era, love was not a priority for a lot of people. And so for him to not necessarily forsake his duty, but to transition his focus from just this business outlook on marriage to actually going for someone he cares for and falling in love and allowing himself everything that he told himself before that he couldn't have. And so it was really nice. I will say though, the complete character arc of his isn't really completed until like the very last few pages. So that was annoying. I felt like I just wanted to shake him and slap him, really. Just like, come on, bro. Like, let's move this along. It's so annoying to listen to their internal debates with themselves. Him and Simon. I can't. But anyway, we'll talk about my opinion in just a sec. Now, both characters are willing to conform themselves to society standards by, getting married, even if that means that it puts their feelings second. And this is displayed in Anthony denying himself love, just outright, period. But also by Kate willing to let Anthony marry Edwina once she eventually comes to that conclusion, despite her feelings for him. And a lot of the times I found with Julia Quinn especially, you can see the distinction in what they're saying versus their thoughts. You can see how that reveals the true conflicts of these books. And so I would argue that it's not necessarily the external factors that really contribute to the tragic flaws of a character or the plot conflict. It's really what's happening on the inside, and how you recognize that is literally just what the character is saying versus what they're thinking in their head, because a lot of the times they will outright contradict themselves, and Anthony and Kate both do that. So it's funny how it reveals, the true nature, their true feelings and expressions, which is the most frustrating part, honestly, as a reader. You're reading the thoughts of someone who is saying the exact opposite and expecting a good outcome. And it's like, you're not even being honest with this other person. You're not telling, or you're withholding information. So that's where the frustration comes as far as a reader standpoint. Now, themes, there are a few. Romance, obviously, I really shouldn't even have to explain any further. This is about courtships, marriage, and sex. That's an important part. There is, again, there's a few pages and a few chapters that are very sex focused. And that is something that was in the first book as well. I'm assuming it's in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So just be mindful of that. If you're squeamish, I don't know why you would be, but okay, second is Mortality. So the late Viscount, which is Anthony's dad, he passed away early, which was 38, from a bee sting. And this is so crazy because it wasn't expected even back then that someone can just drop dead from a bee sting. It was very unusual, and he died very young. And so that, of course, led to Anthony taking over as the head of the family, but it also positioned Anthony to believe that his fate would be the same. So this is where we have that internal fear, because he's isolated himself from love, believing that he will die early, and he doesn't want to leave behind a heartbroken family like he was heartbroken as a child. Now, there is, in the epilogue, Quinn discusses a really good point on the perspective of boys losing their fathers young, and what type of burden it puts on them. And out of everything, that was probably the most impressive and intriguing concept of this book. It's boys feeling like they have to step up for the family. In this sense, it was, I guess, forced, because you had to take on that title. As soon as his dad died, he became the Viscount. He became Lord Bridgerton, and so he is in charge of the entire family's finances, all of their estates. But I think it's a good conversation to have regardless when it comes to boys and even young men losing their fathers, and how they conduct themselves afterwards, and how they grieve, or if they don't grieve. And last theme, devotion. So when it comes to family, Kate and Anthony are very similar because they are very devoted to their families, and that's one of the things that drew them together. Kate has a fixed presence in Edwina's options for courtship, and she's kind of positioned herself as an extra shield of protection to ensure Edwina's happiness in spite of her own. And Anthony, even from the first book, he's been described as not only a rake, but a loving big brother. He continues to support his siblings, and even after him and Kate get married and Edwina becomes his sister-in-law, he offers to provide the dowry for Edwina, which is something that the father usually would do, but Edwina and Kate's father is not alive during this story. And so it's just seeing how seriously he takes familial ties, you know, how important it is for him to be the head of a family, and even down to the financial aspects of it. He's going to provide and protect his family, period. And then when it comes to devotion to personal ethos, which is just, you know, the moral nature that you hold dear to yourself, Anthony, which also in the show they call him Antony, and I don't know if that's maybe because I'm American, I'm not saying it right, but I read it as Anthony, but in the show it's Antony. Now, his personal ethos is that he's going to die early, and he's accepted this, and that is his one guiding belief going forward. So that's really the reason behind most of his decisions, probably 75 to 80% of the book. And it's kind of impressive that he has this statement, I'm going to die early, and he just accepted it and literally lives his life as that is a fact, even though he doesn't know that for sure. And it's very similar to what Simon did in book 1. Okay, a couple motifs, and then we'll get into the opinion stuff. Okay, so I don't know if motif is the right word for this, but I did notice that we only get stories of the Bridgerton siblings during the courtship season. So the book begins at the beginning of the season and it ends at the end. And we don't really know what happens in between. And I would like to know like what they do when they go away, go out of the town. But this, of course, provides the setting for the series storyline. It's an urgency for all of age to wed in a timely manner. And besides the epilogue, we're only afforded that plot. But I will say, now most of the books that are being published, most of the Bridgerton books have the second epilogue. But if you don't have the second epilogue, definitely go out and buy an edition that does, because it provides little updates, on the characters, and it's kind of nice to see. I was really surprised to see that in the second epilogue, and this is like years down the line, they still don't know who Lady Whistledown is. Like, what? Maybe I'm spoiled because I watched the series first, but in the books, they don't know who she is, even in the epilogue. So that's funny. Now, the second motif is weather, and this is because thunderstorms literally immobilize Kate. That's important because Kate is someone who is very strong, and thunderstorms bring out the shy, submissive person that she's quote unquote supposed to be. So that was a reoccurring thing. I guess it always rains in London. So, all right, now when it comes to author intention, I would say for this book in particular, it's to expose the true character of Anthony. There's this continued emphasis on Anthony's label as a rake, because this story reveals the layers behind that label, but also exploring the trauma of a son losing a father. So I think that's the main goal here. And that was the best part of the book, in my opinion. However, why are there 8 books? Because I just don't, I guess to continue the story, to give you guys the stories on your favorite characters and who they married, whatever. I'm going to be honest with you. Am I to my review yet? I am. Yes. Okay. So here's my review. So when it comes to the story, when I first picked this book up, I thought it was very strange. And literally my first sticky note said, this is some weird Hamilton type drama. Why is there a love triangle with sisters involved? And it's not exactly like that, but it's still weird. It's weird in the beginning. It's just strange. However, when you strip down all of the superficial characteristics and the individual stories and backgrounds, this is the same plot structure as the first book. And as someone who, back like 10, 15 years ago, when I was reading like Twilight and Divergent and the Hunger Games and stuff like that, the pull for me to read the next book and the next book and the next book was that the storyline would continue with those same characters or adding in new characters, but we would get a bigger story. With these books, because each one is about each Bridgerton sibling, you're getting the plot of them falling in love with their significant other. And it's kind of the same. It's the same situation where it's 2 people who either hate each other or for whatever reason cannot be together, but they end up somehow getting married, then they realize they actually love each other, and then they go from there. Oh, and also either the guy or the girl has some deep-rooted trauma that they have to work out in order to allow themselves happiness. So it's getting redundant. I say all that to say it's getting redundant to me. I feel like, you know what? I think, in my opinion, this is probably more targeted to the YA readers, the young adult genre. Because it's not like, why else would I read why would I read the next book? And I know I said when I read the first book, I was like, I don't think I'm going to read any more of them. I bought this one specifically because I wanted to kind of understand the storyline before I watched the series. But after reading this, I'm like, I really don't have an interest in reading anymore because it's the same story. Like, I'm not getting anything new. I'm just getting new characters and they're playing the same roles. You know what I mean? So that it's not a bad book, but I'm just like, reading this doesn't make me want to read anymore because I feel like I know everything that I need to know, unfortunately. But when it comes to the characters, everyone really loves Kate, and I just don't think she's that much of an icon as everyone's painting her to be. I think that the reason everyone likes her is because she opposes Anthony so well. But I think in the series, she's going to be freaking fantastic. But in the book, I was just kind of like, I felt like she was very one-dimensional, you know? Like I said, she didn't really have as big of a character arc as Anthony did. So there wasn't much learning going on. She just kind of fell in love. But Anthony was annoying. He's annoying, just like how I thought Simon was annoying. They're both annoying, just like how Edward Cullen is annoying. Their inner monologues and inner rants and ridiculous. But his character arc is the most interesting of the book, so I enjoyed it. Is this a reread for me? No, unfortunately. But it's funny I say that. I don't think I'm going to give these books away, though. So maybe I'll find myself reading them again eventually. I do have the third book, and it's Benedict's story, and that's because I really actually like his character. However, I read the first page or whatever the introduction part was. I can't because it's like his story is surrounded on his romance with a girl who kind of has like a Cinderella thing going on where she's a part of a family that doesn't really like her, and so I don't know. Maybe eventually I'll read that because I bought those two together, but that will be the last book I read for sure. It's nothing new. So it's a good book. I think it's definitely a nice romance book, but I'm not really into period pieces as much. So that could probably be a contribution to this as well. Like the, what's the word I'm looking for? The hype of reading a story about a romance in the 1800s wore off really quickly. So nothing new. But I do have one takeaway here, which is conversations on mortality should be present to some extent in households. I did like the conversation this brought up when we're discussing losing a parent, but most importantly for sons losing their fathers and where that leaves them in the family. I think there's a lot of pressure sometimes on sons to take on the role of the head of the household. So. And if you hear that noise, it started raining. I don't know when, but it's raining. So I apologize if that's really loud. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. I am so excited for this series to come out. That's one thing. I know the series is going to be great. If you haven't watched the series, they have like 8 episodes per season. So far, they've been doing 1 book per season. And they've introduced different characters. They also have the added level of having different races involved in the casting. And so it's not like all white people, which is probably what this book was about. Actually, I think it is because most of them are described as being like blonde, blue-eyed, stuff like that. But if you haven't seen season 1, though, I implore you to watch it, if nothing else, to see Reggae as Simon Bassett. That was my pull in. That man is fine. That man is fine. And honestly, it doesn't really make any sense why he's so attractive. His voice is attractive. His face is attractive. The way he walks is attractive. Unfortunately, he will not be in season 2 though. So, yeah, I can't wait for it to come out. I'm so excited to watch it. And hopefully it lives up to the standard of season 1. Now, for books to come, I am currently reading Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile and The Sword and the Shield by Peniel Joseph. And so I'm reading these at the same time. So whichever one I get done first, that'll be the next review. And that's all for now. I will see everyone next week. I hope everyone has a lovely weekend and see you soon.